Hey, thank you for joining us online today. We hope that this message challenges you and encourages you to experience Jesus together. If you would like to give, you can visit our website at www.hillcrestchurch.info and download our app for a fast, secure, and easy way to give.
All right, my name is Brian Compton. I am one of the pastors here. It's great to see you if I haven't met you yet. I'd love to get that chance by the end of the day today. We have been talking, we're walking through the book of Philippians right now, which is a letter from Paul when he was in prison somewhere to a church that he planted in a town called Philippi. And so he's writing to them. And one of the most important aspects that comes out of this book is that as you follow Jesus, no matter what you walk through, as you follow him, he will cultivate joy within you. And so it's important because I think our world right now, and I think us right now, could definitely benefit from being people who are aware and who are experiencing the joy that Jesus brings. The thing is, I think we look for it in a lot of other places, but it is created from knowing Jesus and from our relationship to him. So really, you can't conjure it up. You have to let it happen because Jesus is in you and he's at work in you. And just so we're on the same page, the working definition that I'm using for joy is calm delight. Now, school is coming back in a couple weeks. So parents, especially as you're getting ready for drop-off, we're needing this calm delight. Like we're needing to pray it right into each and every one of us. We have two high school students. One of them's in running start, so we are back at dropping the other one off. And, the county, they're so good. They're like, let's wait till right before school starts to shut down Anderson Hill and Old Frontier, right where all the cars go. Let's just shut it down and put it in the sidewalk. Good idea? Right, so I'm really already praying and asking Jesus for calm delight, even though it's not me who's going to be dropping the child off. But still, you get where I'm going, right? Like you picking up what I'm putting down, you following me? That joy, it's a byproduct of your relationship to Jesus. And so the question that I want to ask you at the beginning is, as we've been talking about this, and as we've been thinking about it, and as you've been praying through it and working through it, have you been drawn toward your relationship to Jesus a little more throughout the week? That's where you're going to experience joy. If we go to Jesus for joy, that's one thing. But if we just go to Jesus, he's going to do what he's going to do. So the question is, do you find yourself drawn toward him a little bit more? And I hope that you are. The other one is, have you noticed as you experience the joy that Jesus brings, that calm delight that you have you noticed how much better life is when you have that versus when you don't have that? And I think the real test of are you experiencing it is the minute you get into a stressful situation. The minute something doesn't go right for you, that you were expecting to work, the minute a friend or a family member lets you down, the minute your order is wrong at the drive-thru, the minute your work promotion gets passed over or whatever it is, the minute your project you've been working on fails and falls flat on your face, whatever it is, the minute all hell breaks loose in your life, that's all outside of you. You can be in the middle of those storms and yet still be in a place where you're like, we're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I'm still alive. I'm still enjoying life. I don't like what's happening here, but we'll figure it out. So the question is sometimes, not the question, but the observation I'm finding is that you almost need a little bit of tension. You almost need to be roughed up a little bit in order to realize you've got that joy. It's in there because Jesus is in there, and this is what he brings to us. So let's go ahead and start looking into the scriptures, okay? We're looking in Philippians. If you brought your Fire Bible, it is on page 1931, and we're going to start on verse 12 today. And I'm going to try and wrap up the chapter. I got 2 weeks behind, but you just watch and see. Watch what we do. We'll get into this today. Because I want to finish our day today with some communion, with us focusing on all the good that Jesus has created for us and given to us, and how good he is. And I want us to do that as a church family. So that's kind of the plan of the day today. So let's look. I'm going to read a big chunk and share some highlights, and then toward the end we'll go verse by verse here. But let's go ahead in verse 12. Paul's writing to them, and he says, I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped spread the good news. Quick pause. What's happening to him? He's in prison for following Jesus. That doesn't sound good, does it? Let's be honest. If you were going to go to jail today because you followed Jesus, would you keep following Jesus? Don't raise your hand. I want you to just think for a minute. If literally everything could be taken from you because you showed up to this church today, would you still come? Would you still follow Jesus? And so what's happening is he's saying, all that happened, it's actually spreading the good news. Statistically speaking, this has been proven over 2 millennia, every single time the Christian church and the Christian faith gets persecuted and literally gets put to death, it spreads like crazy. Doesn't that blow your mind? We have it so good here. But there are places around the world, even right now, where coming out as a Christian literally could mean execution for that person. It definitely could mean an exile from that community. And over the course of the last 2,000 years, as that has happened, the church has continued to grow and continue to spread. That should say something very, very important about what it actually means to follow Jesus. And so Paul is saying, look, I'm in jail. It's fine, because it's actually doing something good. He's saying it's helped spread the good news. Let's continue. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, those are the people who are actually watching him, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence to boldly speak God's message without fear. That's amazing. This guy goes to jail for following Jesus, and so everyone else is like, yeah, I follow him too. In fact, it's a good thing. Here's what he did for me. That's what's happening around there. It's true that some are preaching out of jealousy and rivalry, but others preach about Christ with pure motives. They preach because they love me, for they know I have been appointed to defend the good news. Those others who do not have pure motives, I'm getting mixed up here. Those others do not have pure motives as they preach about Christ. They preach with selfish ambition, not sincerely intending to make my chains more painful for me. But that doesn't matter. Whether the motives are false or genuine, the message about Christ is being preached either way, so I rejoice. And I will continue to rejoice. For I know that as you pray for me and the Spirit of Jesus Christ helps me, this will lead to my deliverance. So there's a lot happening here. I want to pause to just unpack a few thoughts, because Paul gets real deep real fast when you read and think about what's happening here. And the question I have, can we agree he's facing some pretty substantial adversity? That's what's happening in his life. He is persecuted, legitimately persecuted, and has been arrested because of his faith. And the question for us today is, how does adversity and true persecution, how does that affect our faith in Jesus? For Paul, the adversity actually fueled him spreading the gospel. For him, it was a good thing. And he wasn't like Taylor Swift. Actually, he was like Taylor Swift. When she said, I don't love the drama, it loves me. How are you guys going to sit and just stare at me when I quote Taylor Swift to you in context like that? Come on. Also, we turn the fans down. I'm totally fine with that. Can we crack open the doors? I need a little something. I'm wearing this really thick, nice shirt I got at Costco. And it looks so good, but I was thinking it was going to be like 5 degrees cooler. Thank you guys. You guys are so good. Okay, back to Taylor Swift. Paul didn't go out trying to start drama. He didn't break up with anybody. It came at him, and now he's in jail. He's fine with it, though. This is so important. For us, well, and I want to say this too. Before we get to us, let's look at Paul for one more second. Without the joy that Christ had brought into his life, I don't think he would have been able to see the bigger picture outside of his cell. If I'm in prison, I'm seeing a prison cell. I'm seeing they don't have my right pillow. I'm middle-aged. I need the right pillow, all the right gear at bedtime. Like my bed needs to do all the things. Like all my Netflix settings have to be present. The fan to the right degree. It's all got to be a certain thing. And I know you all look at me. If you're over 35, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. Paul's got none of that. None of it. But he doesn't care. And jails today are not like ancient prisons. You, while on the inside, had to somehow get food from the outside. How does that work? I have no clue. It came from people on the outside, like this church here, sending you gifts and sending you good things. So here he is, but what he sees, and I want to point back to verse 18. He's talking about some people who are preaching with good motives, and some who are preaching, and what they're doing is they're stirring it up. They're causing drama. And look, we got both in church. We have human beings in church, and people are always looking for a perfect church. I promise you, you will not find it while you are alive on this planet, because none of us are perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect church. There is when you get to heaven. That's when it's perfected. We are being perfected, which means you have imperfections. So, no church is perfect. That's not a justification. It just is what it is. The point here is that there are people with good motives and there are people preaching with bad motives. They're doing a good thing from a bad place in their heart. And he says whether their motives are false or genuine, the message about Christ is being preached either way, so I rejoice. How is a prisoner going to say something like that? Unless Jesus is very alive and active inside of his life and has filled him to the point of overflowing with joy. I can't see any other way than that right there. Paul is so connected to Jesus, he's like, look, I don't care what my circumstances are. Because even in prison, me and Jesus are good. Whether they're preaching good or they're preaching bad, preaching is happening. The gospel, which is Jesus lived, died, was buried, and then he rose again, and he has forgiveness for you, and you can accept it. That's the gospel. He's saying that's getting out. Whether they're doing it to make life better or worse for me, I don't care. The point is other people are hearing about Jesus. This is so important. And so because he is so connected to Jesus and he has that joy, he's able to see the bigger picture. Now, I think for us, we miss that. Because I don't think we're always focused on Jesus. I think we come to Jesus with a theology that is opposite of what God wants to do. Theology is just an academic word for what you know about God. I think a lot of times we don't have a good theology of adversity that comes from Scripture. And we'll get into this in a minute. We view God as preventer of adversity. And so we come to Jesus to prevent problems from happening in our life. But he never promises that. In fact, what he is he is a perfecter through adversity. Scripture talks about Jesus being the author and perfecter of your faith. The way he knocks hard edges off of each and every one of us is he lets us get roughed up through adversity. And I know when you hear me say that, you think, man, God's a jerk, but he's not. He is not. So I have 2 kids. I love both of these kids more than I've ever loved myself. And I'm a very selfish person, so that's saying a lot. And I have a wife. I love her more than I'm just going to gush all day today. I would give my life for them easily. I don't do everything for them because, like, remember when your kids are little? You know, you do stuff for them, but you got to let them kind of like do some things and experience a little bit of failures here and there, like appropriate, like, you know, because they need to learn, like, okay, I can do it. You know, especially like when you're teaching them sports and whatnot, like they've got to like learn to like throw the ball and catch the ball, and it's not easy. And you don't like you don't go that far like right away. You wait till they're 16 or 17 and can handle it. But like, you know, it's like, you know, that kind of a thing. You understand where I'm going? Like you're allowing them the chance to build the skills and the ability and the strength and the movement to be able to handle what they're facing. Jesus does the exact same thing for us. As much as we don't want to admit that we're immature, we always can continue maturing. And so from God's perspective, we're still at this stage. Good job. You almost had that. Well, I know we're at our stage being like, I got this whole life thing nailed down. Look at my 401. It's flowing. It's just crushing right now. We're in a down economy. I'm up. Buy low, sell high. Whatever. I talk to friends. They've got money. Check out my ride. I got this sick Kia I've been tricking out. Come on, you guys. Like, again. Maybe you're not. Maybe I'm not. It's okay. We look at ourselves like we're crushing it, and God's like, oh, you almost had that one, little guy. You'll get there. And so there's this gap. And so God is continuing to perfect us, and he uses the adversity and the struggle in order to allow us to be perfected. We come into it thinking, this is how God's going to perfect me. I'm American. You're going to give me everything I want. And God says, you're following me. It's not going to look like that at all. Who said what? So I got on this tangent because a lot of times we think of God as preventer of adversity. He's not. There are times, yes. Yes, there are times. There are times you will walk through the fire and he walks through it with you and you don't even smell like smoke. Yes. But most of the time, you get burnt a little bit and you get stronger. You get some scar tissue, but you are able to trust Jesus through all of it. And that is the plan. That is the goal. That is what perfects our faith. So Paul is here in prison. A man who it's arguably no one has done any more for the ancient church than Paul did. And yet here he is gushing with, man, I'm just so happy the gospel's being preached while he's in prison. This is how his joy is visible. He reminds us that God works in you through the adversity you experience. And I hope that would cause you to review your adversity this week through the lens of joy, recognizing that that's the lens that God has prescribed for you. If he's there, he's going to bring you joy. You might have to uncover it a little bit, but it's there. Earlier, when we were singing, and I wrote it down, "You're never going to let me down." I'm not going to sing it because that would butcher it, but they sing it great. "You are good." Those aren't just song lyrics. These are declarations. Do you know what that means? It's us saying, you're never going to let me down. I'm declaring that. The question we have to ask is, do I think God would let me down? And oftentimes, if we're in prison or we're facing adversity, we think, God, you're letting me down. So then we come here in church, and Beth is singing, "You're never going to let me down. For you are good." And we have to ask ourselves, do I believe that? Do I think that? And so this is where our faith gets mushed out, where we have to decide, okay, is what I've been expecting what God actually said he would do? These are the rough edges of our faith getting smoothed out through the adversity. So I love that we sang these songs today. They could not have been more apropos. What fruit is Jesus trying to cultivate through your adversity? Oftentimes we think, this shouldn't happen, God, you let me down. And God's like, you'll see. I'm actually trying to bring this patience up in your life, or this joy, this peace, this love, this kindness. Your Instagram bio says, be kind, but you're not kind. It's almost like, is that a reminder to you, or kind of, what is it? Because God's saying, I'm trying to get you there. You're not getting there. What fruit is Jesus trying to cultivate through your adversity? And then secondly, looking at Paul, what aspect of his mission is he trying to advance in you and through you and around you? God is always about his mission, which means the gospel getting spread. There's one prevailing story that goes all the way from start to finish of this book, and it is the gospel. That God loves you, lived, died, rose again, that thing that I told you. All the extra is a lot of extra Christian living, which is very important, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is that, do you know that Jesus died for you and has everlasting life for you? Do you want to follow that? Do you want to trust that? Would you put your faith in that? That's the gospel. That mission will not stop until God is done with this era and we're all with him. So he is always trying to advance that. Oftentimes your adversity allows that to be advanced a little bit more. That's what Paul is saying. Some are preaching for good reason, some for bad. I don't care. Whether it's making it easier or harder on me. The good thing is the gospel is being preached. Moving on, verse 20. He says, I fully expect and hope that I will never be ashamed, but that I will continue to be bold for Christ as I have been in the past. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ, whether I live or die. His imprisonment had the potential death penalty at that point in time. So that was a real thing. He says, for me, living means living for Christ. And dying is even better. Why is it better? Because he's with Christ. He's not in prison, he's free with Christ. But if I live, I can do more fruitful work for Christ. So I really don't know which is better. I'm torn between two desires. I long to go and be with Christ, which would be far better for me, but for your sakes, it is better that I continue to live. Knowing this, I'm convinced that I will remain alive so I can continue to help all of you grow and experience the joy of your faith. And when I come to you again, you will have even more reason to take pride in Christ Jesus because of what he is doing through me. These are the words of a man who is so clear about what his purpose and mission in life is. He is willing to be tremendously inconvenienced for the joyful betterment of other people. Sometimes we get inconvenienced and we punish everybody. And Paul was like, look, I'll stay in prison if it means that I can do more good for you. What is your mission? What were you put on this planet to do for Jesus? And if that's not apparent, if it doesn't come to mind yet, I would invite you to continue praying about that, because God has an overall mission and you have a purpose in that mission. He wants you to know it. It doesn't have to be very mysterious. But if you understand which part you're playing in God's overall mission, you will do far better with adversity than not. And the other thing that stands out to me is verse 24. He says, but for your sakes, it's better that I continue to live and to be active and to be engaged in what God is doing. And I would just say that we are better as humankind and as a church. We are better when you are present. We live in a world where we aren't very present, and especially in church world, just watching church engagement, it has just been plummeting for the last 10 to 15 years. COVID didn't help, but it was bad before that, friends. Like I've talked about, we don't engage in church. We go to church, and if they don't give us what we want, we go to other church. That's not what we see in Scripture. So we are far better when you are present. But secondly, when you are here on this planet, we are far better. Verse 27, above all. So all that he's just said so far, above all, you must live as citizens of heaven, conducting yourselves in a manner worthy of the good news of Christ. Citizens of heaven is huge. It brings up ideas of citizenship, obviously, because the Philippians were proud citizens of Rome, and sometimes that conflicted with their faith in Jesus. That means that sometimes good Romans or good Roman Christians would turn on other good Roman Christians because they weren't going with the cultural flow, with what Rome was going for at that point in time. And Paul reminds them to be patriots of heaven, which is another way of saying that. And it's reflected in our conduct, in how we treat other people. The question is, because this has been an issue for us in the past couple years. We've seen church members turn on other church members because of which party they vote for. The question I have for each and every one of us now, while we're not in an election cycle, is who do you believe saves your soul? Jesus or your party? And if it isn't your party, then you might need to make sure that your faith in Jesus is more influential in you and in your thoughts and in your conduct than your faith in your party. Because actions speak much louder than words. And your conduct sends a message about your beliefs. So, can people tell that you follow Jesus by your actions? Both parties say they do, which just tells me it's a wash. But if I can't see Jesus in what you're saying and in what you're doing, it doesn't matter which party you're a part of. The question I have is, are you a citizen of heaven? Do you know Jesus enough to be loving, to be kind, to be at peace, to be joyful, to be good? He continues this thought, then whether I come and see you again or only hear about you, I will know that you are standing together with one spirit and one purpose, fighting together for the faith, which is the good news. What he's saying is, some of you should have my back, but you're in my face. And that's an important posture for the church to take. That regardless of everything else, what is the one thing there? What is the most important thing we're to be fighting for? It's in this verse right here. I'm cheating for you. It is the good news. There is nothing and no issue more prevalent, more important to us as followers of Jesus than to making sure the gospel gets out there. That is the most important thing. I'm in a master's level theology class right now, and I just learned that's it. Nothing trumps the gospel. And there have been times I have preached certain things that have gotten in the way of the gospel and not recognized I'm preaching something that's secondary or third or fourth level, like it's more important than someone knowing Jesus. Paul was telling them right at the beginning, the most important thing for all of you to be unified in and to not let any other second, third, fourth, or fifth issue break that unity is in your faith in the gospel, in what Jesus has done for all of humankind. And if you can't make that the bigger priority, then something's got to change in your life. And so what happened is they'd be like, oh man, you're not, you love Jesus, but you're not allegiant to Rome. You're not doing it the way we're supposed to do it here. This faith was counterintuitive to what was happening in the Roman world. They were literally at odds. And so sometimes kind of the more national side, the countryism more important than the faith side would take over. And so, like I said, people that were supposed to have each other's backs, they were in each other's face and at each other's throats. And here's the other thing. When we get under pressure, when we get stressed, the tendency is to take it out on others who are around us. And in this case, it was others in the church. I'm getting stressed out. I'm feeling this pressure at home because my faith is changing from what's normal and what's common. And so I'm going to take it out on you. Probably because I see freedom in you that I don't have. Man, when I first became a follower of Jesus, I was only 16, but it changed what was happening in the culture of the house. It was against how we were living and what we were doing. And I remember coming to Jesus and finding all kinds of freedom internally. I literally was becoming a transformed person, and it disrupted the house. And you'd think like, oh, everything would be at peace and calm and cool. Yeah, but if you got 4 people in a home and one all of a sudden radically starts to transform, and I use radically, I wasn't becoming a radical, but I mean like it was a very big change, that changes everything. And I remember there was some of that tension, there was some of that conflict. For my parents, it was like, what is happening with this guy? I remember when I first went to the youth group, they literally were like, don't become one of those weird religious zealots. And I was like, oh, don't worry, Mom and Dad. Anyhow, side note. When we get stressed, when we get pressure, we tend to bring it to those around us. And that's what was happening in this church. A fundamental aspect of following Jesus is that we stand together with other Christians. And I would just say the easiest place to do it is in your own church. This is your church family. Can you stand with them? Focused on, look, we have the gospel in common. That is going to be the foundation that we stick to. We're going to keep that main thing, the main thing. That's one spirit and one purpose, and that equals the same mind, that we all are about, first and foremost, loving Jesus and spreading the gospel. The other stuff, it is not as important as that right there. We can disagree on many things, but there's one thing that will always unite us in our purpose and our mission. It's Jesus, his lordship, his mission, his path. Because let's be honest, if something else pulls us away from that, that thing was more important than what Jesus has said is the most important thing here. And this is going to be hard for us to hear, but as Christians, we aren't to be fighting others. He says we are to fight with one another, fighting together. That means whatever energy you would have put toward fighting, we're putting for the advancement of the good news. So am I fighting? Am I fighting? Who am I fighting? Am I fighting with people in my church, people in my home, people in my family? And what am I fighting for? These are important things for us to ask and to focus on and pay attention to. Because there's going to be times you're going to be like, I fought so hard, Jesus. And he's like, yeah, you were in the whole wrong arena. I never asked you to fight about any of this. I'm just asking you now, here and now, to make sure you're fighting about the things Jesus is asking you to fight. He goes on in verse 28, don't be intimidated. And we're getting close, Jared, or Dylan, that's right. Don't be intimidated in any way by your enemies. It'll be a sign to them that they are going to be destroyed, but that you are going to be saved, even by God himself. Today, we focus on the destruction, and we try to wield that over people. I know I'm going to be saved, you're going to be destroyed. That's not the intent of the idea here. There is no glee in others finding destruction. And if we're going to follow Jesus and be glad and tout that you might be destroyed, whoever you are, We do not have the heart and the attitude of Christ. That is not, I'm grateful that I'm going to be saved. I want to share that gratitude with you. No way. That's not it. And this passage is about having faith that's greater than our fears. Jesus fills you with joy to counteract intimidation. Intimidation implies that you believe that thing is stronger than God in your life. If I'm intimidated by death, it's because I question whether God can do what he says he's going to do. If I'm intimidated by this other outspoken person, it's because I think they're stronger than God is in my life right now and what God is saying to me and what God can say through me. And so being intimidated has that implication, but being unintimidated sends a message that you are saved by God, that you are secure in who he has made you. And Jesus provides courage, but joy clears a space for it to be in your life and in your heart. That's how these things interact within you. Verse 29 says, you have been given not only the privilege of trusting in Christ, but also the privilege of suffering for him. Say what? How is suffering a privilege? I mean, I did CrossFit for 5 years, and I get it. But come on. How is suffering a privilege? Here's the thing about suffering. Remember what I said about adversity? It's the same thing. Suffering refines your faith. There is a lot of scripture that equips you to deal with, and embraces suffering. We as a culture do not. We don't want it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't know what to do with it. But suffering refines your faith. Also, it proves that you genuinely know Jesus. There are certain things you cannot learn about Jesus until you have suffered with him. And a lot of us do our best to resist the suffering that God will try and lead us through. Because we are afraid of suffering. We're afraid of being out of control and being uncomfortable. And you will limit how much you know Jesus. I have a friend. I've worked with her for 9 years. I've never once been inside her home. I give Tammy the hardest time about it all the time. She said a million times, just come over. At this point, I won't. It's been 9 years. We've got a long run. I've been to her deck out front. I've been that far. Didn't go inside. Now, I know Tammy very well. Our working relationship, the only other person I've worked with more than Tammy is Amber. And so we know each other very well, but I've never been in her house, so I only know her. Do you understand? I'm not articulating this very well, but you get it, right? And I'm not messing with you. It's a funny story. I'm not messing with you at all. She's also, well, you've been in my house, so I guess. Suffering is moving from the entryway of being in Jesus' home past the living room into the family room. Some houses are set up. I'm from California. They're mostly set up where there's like a front entry room, like a living room where you have you bring the solicitors in. You can only come in this far. And then there's a family room that's like further, deeper in where people really like to take their shoes off. What they're really watching is on TV in there. That's the real home. And in Jesus' family, he's inviting you to come all the way in, but you have to go through like that hallway of suffering to get there. And so when the suffering comes, embrace it, because Jesus is really giving you an invitation to know him more deeply. No, it's not pleasant, but afterwards, it's paradise. It absolutely is. And here's the last verse, and then we'll do communion. He says, we're in this struggle together. You have seen my struggle in the past, and you know that I'm still in the midst of it. And I want to focus on that word together. Together. We tend to do things all by ourselves. We tend to isolate. But Paul is saying, Jesus is saying through Paul, look, I'm struggling here in prison. You guys are struggling in your hometown. But we're doing it together. God is essentially trying to refine each and every one of us to know him more deeply. That's why we're walking through adversity. We're walking through suffering. We're walking through fighting. And we're walking through conflict. But it's to know him better. And let's make sure that we focus our conflict in the right direction. That we know who the real enemy is. It's not here. It is not within this room. And let's do this together. In 2020, we were forced to isolate. You were all there. And I was chaplaining with the fire department a lot in 2020. And I saw some of the most devastating consequences of people who stay isolated. And I'll leave it at that. But it was absolutely devastating. And we have to unlearn how to isolate. And in our culture says do it by yourself. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And we love that, but that's isolation. We call it independence, but it's isolation. It's us showing one side when really inside we don't know how to connect and be intimate. Jesus is saying, look, this is something you all will go through. It's together. When you move toward being together, you are moving closer toward Jesus. And when you move toward isolating, no matter how much you love Jesus and you and him have your own private thing, you are isolating yourself. And you are cutting yourself off from what Jesus has for you. So I would do your best to remain together. Let's move toward communion now, okay? Do you guys all have one of your little cups? Does anyone not have one of these? Can you raise your hand real high? Gina's going to come by and make sure you got one. Anyone else? You missed these? We're doing this together today. At the end, we want to do it a little bit different today so that we could do one big thing as a church family. And this is so symbolic. What we're doing, it's a very, very special and important thing in the way we do church. It's to symbolically recognize the sacrifice that Jesus has made for each and every one of us. And it's bigger than a sacrifice. It represents a covenant, which is a very binding contract between God and us. But God made it. So it's based on his character, not our character. We could renege on our side of the covenant all day long, but God still leaves it in place because he does not change. So this is based on God's character and God's work. We are the beneficiaries. That's what it's all about. So Paul, who we were reading from in Philippians, wrote to the church in Corinth. And he said in Corinthians 11, on the night when Jesus was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took some bread and he gave thanks to God for it. And then he broke it in pieces and said, this is my body. Do this in remembrance of me. Let's take this. This represents Jesus' flesh being destroyed so that our flesh can be healed. Our bodies can be healed. This is why we have an immune system. And secondly, sometimes they don't work here. But in heaven, in our next life, this is where everything is perfected. This is a step and an act of faith that everything Jesus walked through, we get to benefit from. And when we do this in this church, we pray that if you need any type of physical healing, that in any way touches your body at all, we pray that God would do that today. So if that's you, I want you to hold on to that. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for your covenant, your love, that you allowed yourself to be tortured and destroyed on the way to the cross and on the cross so that we could be made whole. It's unfair. We don't deserve it. And yet we receive it because you offer it and because we are grateful to you. Thank you for offering to us what we couldn't do for ourselves. And so Jesus, today, in gratitude and in faith, we're going to eat this little piece of cracker to represent us being changed and transformed by you. And I pray that if there's anyone in this room who needs any kind of physical healing, no matter what it is, Jesus, I pray that you would heal them today. In Jesus' name, take the bread. Paul continues and says, in the same way, he took the cup of wine after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood. Do this to remember me as often as you drink it. For every time you eat the bread and you drink the cup, you are announcing the Lord's death until he comes again. What's in this cup is the signature on the bottom line. Once Jesus' blood was shed, it couldn't be unshed. But that was the perfect sacrifice that humankind needed, that we needed as people who have sinned and have fallen short. But Jesus never did. So the signature at the end of the covenant is Jesus' work. We can't be perfect, but he is perfect. And we get to participate in this covenant because of his perfection. So let's drink this, recognizing that today. Jesus, thank you again for your work on the cross, for the goodness that you did for our benefit. We didn't ask, we didn't even know. You took it upon yourself because of your love for humankind. And we are so grateful to you. We love you. We are grateful to participate as a family together today in recognizing your covenant. May we be people who are different, who are transformed, who look like you and act like you, and our conduct reflects you have changed us from the inside out. May we be people who honor you in all that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. If you are interested in knowing more about having a working relationship with Jesus Christ and you've not made that decision, I would love to interact with you afterward. You can text the word HCJesus to the number 94000, and it'll come straight to my inbox and we can start that conversation. So if you're interested in that, you're curious about that, I would love to talk with you more about that, okay? Secondly, I hope you can make it Thursday out to Island Lake. We'd love to spend some time with you just before summer ends and school year begins. And really, if you're looking to connect with anyone in the church, perfect way to do it. So hope you guys can make it. If you have any questions about where it is and all that, just email us here at the church and we'll make sure you have the right information. God bless you guys. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you soon.